Yeah.
Councillors, thank you. We'll get the meeting underway. Nyama, Warranjeri Coolan, Mirambika Lebik Winarop Daraban, Bagangbal Awit Juri, Bagangukal Nangit Bambuth Ba Yelling Boo. I acknowledge the Wurundjeri people on whose land Darebin Council stands and pay my respects to elders past and present. Membership of this committee is as listed in the agenda, noting that Councillor Williams is on an approved leave of absence. Conflicts of interest. Councillors, are there any conflicts of interest to declare? No? Thank you. That brings us to confirmation of the minutes of the Planning Committee. Thank you, Councillor Lasserf, and seconded by Councillor McCarthy. All those in favour? Thank you. Those minutes are confirmed. That brings us to consideration of reports. Over to the planning staff. Thank you.
Thank you, councillors. This is an application for a medium density development at 58 Johnson Street, Wollongong. The proposal is for 4 dwellings on site with access to Johnson Street. The site is also unique in that it has a right-of-way abuttal on 2 sides. All the dwellings are 2 bedrooms. The bedrooms are located on the ground level. The living zones are located on the 1st floor, and then at the 2nd level, 3 of the dwellings have roof terraces. The dwelling front of the street has a balcony to the street. The maximum height of the development is 9.4 metres, measured to the ridge of the roof over the terrace access stairs. Each dwelling includes a single garage with vehicle access proposed by way of an existing right-of-way. The right-of-way is constructed from bluestone. Councillors, this application was advertised in the normal fashion, a sign displayed on the land, notices sent to adjoining owners and occupiers. And as a result of that notification, objections have been received. Sorry, I just got the number of objections. 12 objections, and we also had a letter of support. The objections summarised include the following: car parking and access issues, density over development, neighbourhood character, noise associated with roof terraces, overlooking, access to sunlight, request to increase the height of the fence at the southern boundary, historical significance of the existing dwelling, building height, devaluation of property, and the bedrooms are small. Councillors, our assessment of this application is that it is a good development and worthy of support. In summary, the proposal achieves a high degree of compliance with Clause 55, the relevant planning controls. And where standards haven't been met, the objectives have been met. The proposal also has very good internal amenity, and I might briefly talk about that. Bedrooms all have access to natural daylight and ventilation. The windows face either garden space or an open area. You don't have any habitable room window as in the bedroom that faces directly into a side fence as such. All the entries are clearly visible either from the right-of-way or Johnson Street. The living zones have a northern orientation, connect to open space, so dwelling 1 has connection to a balcony, dwelling 2, 3 and 4 have connection to small balconies as well as roof terraces. Now, the balcony and the terraces all exceed the minimum dimensions required and area required by the controls. In terms of the development being site responsive, in terms of how it associates with the neighbouring context, we have residential development to the north, it's separated from the site by a right-of-way. We have development to the east, separated from the site by a right-of-way. The development to the east is in the commercial zone. separated by Johnson Street. The sensitive interface is the property to the south, which is 56 Johnson Street. And we believe that the applicant has addressed, and the designer has addressed, that sensitive interface. And I'll just quickly explain how that has been done. When you look at the south elevation, you don't see a sea of windows. Windows are discrete, appropriately located, with appropriate sill heights. In addition to that, the materials of choice predominantly is a sheet steel, a blue scope steel. One material predominantly, so it doesn't draw your eye to that elevation. The development is set back from that elevation to comply with risk code and in some instances exceeds the risk code requirements. In terms of contribution, further contribution to neighbourhood character, the dwelling one's presentation to the street has an overall form that is traditional. You've got a gabled roof, you've got a setback to the street, which is to be landscape and a path leading to the front door. The lower level has window proportions that are similar to those found in the street and surrounding area. And finally, the choice of materials throughout are high quality. So timber, brick and sheet steel. Overall, councillors, we believe that development is appropriate and should be supported. We've imposed conditions, more or less standard conditions, other than a couple of the bedrooms along the right-of-way. We have recommended that they be provided with double glazing so you don't have noise associated with vehicle traffic penetrate those rooms. A couple of changes to some windows, but other than that, supportable. Thank you, councillors.
Thank you, Mr. Rollis. We hear from the objectors. We have one registered speaker. That's Mr. Alex Zakamidis. Yes, please come up to the table.
Hello everyone, good evening. So I obviously designed this property. The plan has touched on most of the points contributing to the architecture, so I won't go too much into that. I looked over the objections that were made by the objectors. Most of them are very general and unanimous across the board, with things like privacy and noise and parking, which we've addressed and responded to. Yeah, so look, we worked really hard with council and all the consultants to make sure we mitigated most of the issues and sensitive interfaces, and we think we've provided a very high level development for future occupants, which is going to fit in with Thornbury and the vibrant lifestyle that Thornbury offers. So, yeah, that's about it. I had a list of notes, but as I mentioned, the plan has touched on most of the things, so I think it speaks for itself. When I look at the drawings and the plans, I do feel personally that it is a good response to the site. Yes, it is a smaller site, but there is no doubt that we've taken into consideration the laneway that offers a great buffer between the north and the east, which helps to reduce the visual bulk, which in any other circumstances would cause a problem. But having those laneways to our advantage, I definitely think it makes this development purposeful. We've worked with traffic consultants to make sure that the access and the egress for future occupants is satisfactory. Objectors also made concerns with the privacy and things like that, but we've followed res code. We've got screening where there needs to be screening. We've got obscure glazing. In my opinion, there's no chance for any downward views or any hindrance on neighbouring private open spaces. Objectors also made reference to some noise issues that might occur from the rooftop terraces, but I think that's a bit of speculation to character types that might fill these dwellings in the future. The way we see it, we're offering fantastic private open spaces to sit up on a rooftop and have a quiet barbecue with family and friends is a great response, and something we should be promoting as opposed to rejecting. So I think it's a great use of the space, offering future occupants that are generally going to be young professional individuals or young couples a fantastic way of getting into the area of Thornbury. Most of the single dwellings in these areas are $1 million plus, which is an old issue that's brought up all the time about young people and affordability. These are the solutions we need to combat that. So without sounding biased, we had an opportunity to make a proposal where we worked very hard from an architectural standpoint and a standpoint of considering the neighbourhood. But we've also had to look into where this neighbourhood is likely to go over the next 10 years and what's currently happening. And we feel that this is sort of like potentially a starting point of where things should go, and it's a well-rounded application. I hope you guys see it that way too, and if there's any ways that we can make it better or make some changes to help mitigate any issues, I'm all ears, but I'll leave it at that, and thank you for your time. What did I hit? Minute left? Should I go on?
Thank you, Mr. Sakmakidis.
Sakmakidis, yeah, no worries.
You may resume your seat in the gallery. Thank you. Councillors, are there any objectors? There are none listed, and I don't believe there are any here to speak. So, councillors, do you have any questions for the officers? Councillor McCarthy.
Thank you, Chair. I just wish to get some clarity in relation to the fence on the southern boundary through you to our officers. In relation to that negotiation process of achieving a higher fence height as desired by the objectors, I just wanted to be clear that Council has no role in that process, but that is governed purely by the Fences Act and the negotiation between the respective property owners.
And Mr. Wallace?
Councillors, we've imposed a condition requiring a 1.8 metre high fence. That falls within the planning control. The objector is seeking a fence of 2.1 metres in height. We don't want to require a larger fence because then it blurs the line of the planning control and the Fencing Act control. Should both parties decide that a 2.1 high fence works and they come to an agreement, we won't have an issue with that. But we are stipulating that the fence be 1.8 metres to address overlooking issues, and that's the height the planning scheme refers to.
Thank you. Councillor McCarthy?
Just as a supplementary, given that was a very specific request by a neighbouring objector, just wanting to clarify whether that will be communicated directly to that objector in any way other than through this report, if that's possible, just so that it's clear that that has been considered.
We certainly can. That's not an issue.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Messina?
Through you, Mayor Rennie. My question is in relation to the size of the block, first of all.
The size of the block is 410 square metres. 410
square metres. And are there any other block sizes with 4 dwellings in the area at this current state?
I won't know that offhand, Councillor. I won't know that offhand.
Okay,
sorry.
thank you. My next question relates to the vehicles, size of the vehicles in the drawings. Are we looking at vehicles turning that are 4-wheel drives or just small vehicles based on the drawings that have been provided?
The planning scheme refers to a minimum dimension, and that's the average vehicle. So these garages are designed to accommodate the average size vehicle. If it's a very large vehicle, it may not fit that space, but that would apply to any development that we consider. You don't design for the largest, you don't design for the smallest. It's what the regulation requires.
And my next question is, there's perhaps from the drawings, I feel there's not enough natural light. Can I have some commentary about the natural light in this particular development, please?
Certainly. I think this development goes beyond the control. As I mentioned earlier on, the bedrooms, and you don't often see this, but all the bedrooms, for example, so dwelling 1 has outlook to the front garden and the street. All the other bedrooms have outlook to a service yard and then some landscaping and a fence. The control in the planning scheme allows the designer to create a development where your bedroom window can face the side fence and be a metre away from it. And we see that as being a very poor design outcome, very poor for internal amenity. So all these bedrooms are designed to take into account space, and that basically says good internal livability, and the same applies for the first floor living space. There's good access to, there's northern orientation to the living areas, and there's access to sunlight and daylight and ventilation to the balconies and the terraces.
A supplementary question through you, Mayor Rennie.
Yes,
in relation to the 12 objections and the 1 letter of support, I don't have a plan that actually says where the objectors actually reside, and I don't have any information about the letters of support. I'm just wondering if we have information on that.
There is one letter.
Yes, we do. I think Councillor Newton can actually show that to you. Councillors, are there further questions? Is there a motion? Yes, Councillor Lawrence.
Just got a question through Mayor Rennie.
Councillor Lawrence, can you just put your microphone on so that it can get recorded? Thank you.
Just one question regarding the existing structure. Just got some small photos of it here at the moment. I note there's no heritage overlay. Was that street subject to any application in 2013 for an extension of heritage overlays?
Thank you for that question, Councillor Lawrence.
Not that we're aware of, councillors. Clearly the site in this immediate area doesn't have heritage control. The homes are of post-war period homes, but no heritage overlay applies. But I can't answer your question, I don't know.
Thank you. Are there further questions, councillors? Councillor Greco.
Just a quick question. Just in terms of the lane, could I get a sense of what the width of the lane is?
3 metres to the east and 3 metres to the north. It's a constructed bluestone laneway, councillor, to the north and to the east.
Yep. Thank you. Yes, do I have a motion, councillors? Councillor Newton.
Thank you, Mayor Rennie. I'm happy to move the recommendation.
And seconded by Councillor Amir. Thank you. Councillor Newton.
And I can sit down, right? So for this one, I know this area quite well, and I think that it is a good place to have a development where young single professionals or couples can live. It's very close to High Street, it's close to Croxton Station, it's close to the tram, it's very lively on the street there. I'm a little bit concerned about the sizes of the bedrooms, but I think that some of the questions that have been answered about that they do face gardens rather than just fences make this one passable for me.
Thank you, Councillor Newton. Councillor Amir.
Seconding Councillor Newton's comments, it is an area that it would be certainly in very high demand near the high street shops, very close to public transport, good for young people, hopefully affordable, and it's good to see the outdoor spaces with the terraces and the the porch area. I also share the concern about the size of the bedroom. One of my considerations I think of is if you put a double bed in the room, can you touch every wall without leaving the bed? And I do wonder about some of these bedrooms, they might not pass the more than an arm's length rule. That said, I acknowledge that we do need more housing in this area. It is a compliant design with consideration given to the natural light, and so I'm happy to support this as well.
Thank you, Councillor Mayor. Are there further speakers? Councillor Messina.
Through you, Madam Mayor Rennie. I have a look at this development and things that stick out for me is the size of the property. It is a little bit small in terms of providing for residential dwellings. I would have liked to see some diversity in terms of maybe a 3-bedroom in there, but I do consider that it is a small allotment, and we've got 27% garden space, which is more than the minimum recommendation, and the balcony and the terrace are quite large. So I'm happy to support it, but I would like to see a little bit more of diversity in the dwelling sizes in terms of the in a development. I also would like to hopefully that the bins are covered and all the air conditioners are covered. Aesthetically, I think it's quite pleasing, and when I have a look at a development, I think if this was to go to VCAT, and I do acknowledge that there was 12 objections, would VCAT reject this or support this? So I'm happy to support it based on what's in front of me. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Messina. Are there further speakers? Councillor Lawrence.
Mayor Rennie, yes, I'd like to speak against the motion.
Yes?
Yes, look, looking at the design, it looks quite attractive with the treatments and the textures and those things, and that's certainly good to see good quality design coming through. However, we're being asked to ignore a number of our setbacks, street setback, the parking location, the side setbacks and the wall boundaries. And overall, we're actually lowering our standards to make 4 units happen on 400 square metres. I am familiar with Thornbury. I'm familiar, obviously, with Reservoir, which has got double the land. But this is still in a principally residential zone. It has intact post-war weatherboards, which I personally think for 20 years I've thought we should be actually protecting, and has a low density character there. If this was in the commercial strip, this kind of density I think would be appropriate, but actually it abuts to the north in unmodified, intensified, low density family homes. And in that case, I wonder if by breaching all our guidelines, we're making what should be a 3-unit site into a 4-unit site. And I just don't see the strategic need to compromise our standards to affect a 4-unit site rather than a 3. So I can't support it.
Thank you, Councillor Lawrence. Are there further speakers? Councillor Greco.
Thank you, Chair. Look, this is one of those cases where it's sort of on the borderline, as we've all acknowledged in our speeches, and I find that I think the principal point here is that the size of the land and the fact that 4 dwellings are going to be built on this 400, just over 400 square metre land. I think it would be more appropriate if 3 dwellings were built on this size block, as has been mentioned by other councillors, and may have also alleviated some of the issues associated with the street setback and also the side and rear setbacks. Also, I have concerns in relation to, as even mentioned by some of the councillors that are supporting the development, in regards to the sizes of the bedrooms and just the overall condensation of the development. Also, there are, and I understand from the drawings that whilst they may seem theoretically quite practical in terms of the access to and from the development, but I'm not sure actually in reality whether that small laneway will be able to fully cater for the access to these units. Look, on that basis, it's one of those line ball ones, but I think that it errs more towards not being supported because of the many issues that have been associated with this. If the developer come back to us with a three-dwelling development, maybe with some diversity of housing, in terms of having a 3-bedroom together with 2-bedroom units, then I think it could be supportable.
Time, Councillor.
But what I have before me, I cannot support.
Thank you. Are there further speakers? No? There being none, I'll ask Councillor Newton if you would like to exercise your right of reply.
No, thank you, Mayor Rennie.
Okay. Thank you, councillors. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour of the motion and against? That vote is 4-4, which means that I have a casting vote, and I'll use that casting vote to vote against the motion. The Planning Committee has determined not to grant a planning permit. Sorry. The motion is lost. Thank you. Is there another motion to resolve the application?
May I ask a question, Mayor Rennie?
Yes, you may, Councillor Messina.
I'd like to ask through you, through the officers, in terms of the setbacks, and if this application was to go to VCAT, would we have an issue regarding the setbacks
Councillor
not complying?
Messina, I think that's not a question you can ask at this point.
Well, I'm sort of forgotten the language.
Councillors, we need to resolve this application one way or another, so I'm asking for a motion.
Mayor Rennie, I'm trying to...
And you may seek advice from the officers.
Yeah, I'm just trying to draft one, but I'm rusty on the language of...
Can I propose...
So I think officers will help with that.
Chair, if I can propose a 5-minute adjournment to allow Councillor Lawrence to consult with officers in relation to this.
Yes, we'll just adjourn for 5 minutes. We'll recommence at 6:35.
Well, we can't redesign into 3. I can say it doesn't... You can so...
You've got a copy of what?
There you go.
That's what I want, yes.
Thanks.
I'm not going to address the fencing issue. I'm just going to do a refusal. That's it. That's it. That's okay.
Can we have a copy?
Yes.
That's a refusal. I'm not going to redesign. It's not a matter of deleting the unit. It's
No, that's what I'm trying to work out what you want to do. Would you want to
just a review
to
on this setbacks because
Thank you, councillors, and thank you particularly for your patience to members of the gallery for that short adjournment. Councillors, is there a motion? So I'll just get you to turn your microphone on, Councillor Lyons.
I have a motion for refusal.
Yes?
The motion is an alternate motion to the officer motion. It is that council refuse the application with grounds as follows. Number one, the proposal does not comply with clause 22.02, neighbourhood character of the Darebin Planning Scheme, or the Darebin Neighbourhood Character Study in terms of vegetation, siting, height and building form. Number two, the proposal does not comply with the following standards or objectives at clause 55 of the Darebin Planning Scheme as follows. Clause 55.02-1, neighbourhood character. The proposal does not respect the existing preferred neighbourhood character of the area. B, clause 55.03-1, street setback. The proposed street setback does not comply with the standard B6. Clause number C, clause 55.04-1, the side and rear setbacks. The proposed northern side setbacks and eastern rear setbacks do not comply with standard B17. D, clause 55.04/2, walls on boundaries. The proposal walls on the northern and eastern rear setback do not comply with standard B18. Number three, that the proposal is an overdevelopment of the site.
Thank you, Councillor Lawrence. Is there a seconder for that motion? Councillor Lasserf, thank you. Councillor Lawrence, would you like to speak to that motion?
Yes, Mayor Rennie. This motion seeks to assert the controls in the planning, the local planning scheme, in particular in relation to the neighbourhood character of the area, which I'd mentioned both to the south, to the west and to the north of the site is single dwelling buildings. Many are intact, in fact intact or being renovated post-war weatherboards. The streetscape is actually also intact with large setbacks and verandas. The style there, I don't think it is 1920s, but it mocks or imitates some 1920s with open verandas and a fairly open architectural space at the front. Again, in terms of the mechanics of side setbacks and rear setbacks and wall boundaries, they're fairly clear, and they've 4 or 5 of those conditions are shown in the officer's report as being non-compliant. Again, these non-compliance reflect that the development is obviously with a lane lay a good place to have 3 developments or 3 units, but the 4 unit is exceeding the development potential of the site, and those setbacks not being met is a clear indication that it's an overdevelopment.
Thank you, Councillor Lawrence. Councillor Lasserf.
I won't add much to Councillor Lawrence's comments because I think he's covered my concerns well, particularly in relation to the neighbourhood character of the street and the intact nature of the street. So there isn't really another development along that street or adjacent streets that are of this nature. I also have concerns of the non-compliance to the setbacks, as Councillor Lawrence has covered, and also, as mentioned in Councillor Amir's earlier comments around the bedroom sizes and the amenity of the ground floor bedrooms. I think given, as Councillor Lawrence has said, given the 4 unit development, it has really compromised on the eternal amenity of some of aspects of the units. So I think that this could be a really good site for potential development, but scaled back to address some of our concerns here tonight.
Thank you, Councillor Lasserf. Are there any further speakers? Councillor Gueco.
I'd like to propose an additional point to the motion, and hopefully it'll be acceptable to the mover and the seconder. It reads as follows: the proposal does not provide for an adequate mix of housing on the site.
Is that acceptable to the mover and seconder?
Through you, Mayor Rennie, I'd just like to seek advice from the officers in regards whether an amendment along that lines needs to cite a policy document, a housing policy.
Could I get some advice on that, please, from Mr. Rudd, perhaps?
Well, one of the challenges you have with specifying or requiring a mix of housing for a development of this scale is only for dwellings. And at the moment, our housing strategy talks about the greatest need being two-bedroom dwellings. And it talks about a spread and a mix of housing right through from 3-bedroom, 2-bedroom to 1-bedroom, but the largest need and gap is identified as 2 bedrooms.
Thank you. Councillor Lawrence, do you accept the amendment? And Councillor...
I will accept the amendment, and with the wording that was suggested...
Okay.
I don't accept the amendment.
Pardon?
I don't accept the amendment.
You don't accept it. So the amendment has not been accepted. It will need to be debated if there is a seconder for the amendment.
If it's not accepted by the seconder, I'm prepared to withdraw the amendment.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Greco. We'll therefore return to the debate. Are there further speakers? Yes, Councillor McCarthy.
Thank you, Chair. Look, I'll support this because we need to make a decision, and for me this application has been conditioned as is outlined. I think it's really important for us to be really frank about the reality of this application, which is that I'm not as confident as I would be with other applications that we'll be successful at VCAT upholding this decision. What I would hope to see is that in our defence of this refusal, if this is successful, that we are also wary of the importance of the conditions if this was to be accepted at VCAT. That's not a matter that we can deal with here. However, I want to recognise that there are a lot of conditions that were attached to the original proposed approval. If this was to be refused here and appealed at VCAT, I'd want to make sure that we put up a robust case. Therefore, the strength of the proposed refusal as put forward by Councillor Lawrence is acceptable so that we make a decision. But I think as councillors we need to be very wary of these sorts of applications, which from my perspective this is not an ideal application, but it does seem to comply on the whole, and there are elements there which are less compliant and have been conditioned into submission. So not ideal from that perspective, but certainly we are in a very different planning environment as we get closer and closer to High Street, which is, this is not on High Street, but it is not far away, and I think we need to be wary of that. But I'll still support the refusal so that we can move forward.
Thank you, Councillor McCarthy. Are there further speakers? There being none, I'll put this motion to the vote. All those in favour? And against? Thank you. That motion is carried. The Planning Committee has resolved to refuse to grant a planning permit. This decision may be appealed. The applicant has 60 days to appeal to VCAT, and all parties will be informed of this decision. Thank you. That brings us to other business on the agenda. Other business is, yep, Councillor Surf. Oh.
Sorry, you didn't read it out.
The general planning information attached, that it be noted. Councillor Surf moved, and Councillor McCarthy. Thank you. All those in favour? That motion is carried. That brings us to the end of the Planning Committee. Thank you for your attendance, and particularly thanks to members of the gallery, and thank you for your patience while we had the short adjournment.